Yeah. All right. What is up, Rad Potential YouTube? Welcome to another Radformational video. So, in today's video, we're going to talk about primary and secondary ports, primary and secondary porting, and those effects on the drivability of your engine. Okay? So, those of you who've never been here before, Rad Potential YouTube channel. We work on all sorts of rotary stuff. We work on all sorts of just anything problem-solving stuff. If this is your first Radformational video, there's plenty of other good content on this channel for you guys to learn from, and I'd love for you guys to stick around, go watch some other videos, and check it out. So, getting into primary and secondary porting. So we're going to start from the very beginning. So, this is a rotary engine right here, right? Underneath this little deal. And as you can see, this is what would be called a 4-port rotary engine. Can you guess why? 1, 2, 3, 4 intake ports, okay? On a rotary engine, the center iron is your primary ports. The outer irons, your front and rear, are your secondary ports. So, we're going to move to the bench. And I'm going to show you the reason that these are set up, explained, sized like this. Okay, so primary ports right here. Super small. This is a center iron out of a 6-port engine. You can see super small primary ports. Secondary ports, however, are giant, big boy ports, okay? Lots of airflow. Now, you might ask, all right, he's talking about primary ports, talking about secondary ports. What is even the significance of having two different sized ports? Don't piston engines just have one valve or two valves per cylinder, and they suck a lot of air in and all that stuff, right? Yes, you are correct. Piston engines, depending on how your throttle body setup is on a rotary engine, there is no difference between a primary and secondary port. But from the factory, a rotary engine has what's called throttle body staging, okay? Throttle body staging inside of your throttle body where you're hitting the gas pedal and it's opening things to allow air into the engine is staged, thus controlling different amount of airflow for the primary and a different amount of airflow added in the secondary setting, right? So, right here, like I said, unpacking everything. This is your typical 3-hole rotary throttle body. This is for a GSLC. FD and FC one, they look real similar. It might be bigger, smaller, triangle shaped, you name it, right? So, within this throttle body, you have this top port here, okay, the top hole, and there's 2 holes in the bottom. Alright, now, as I hit the throttle, okay, I'm assuming you guys can still see in there, as I hit the throttle, and I'm giving it just barely any, you can see that top one's moving, right? See it in there moving? That is your primary portion of the driving scenario, right? Your input working. So, small amounts of air per small throttle input, right? Better control of low flow airflow situations with a smaller hole, right? It's like trying to make a garden hose amount of water come out of a 60-inch pipe is going to be really hard because you're only going to be able to pull the gate valve or whatever open 2 millimeters before a garden hose amount of water comes out because you have this giant hole. Okay, so that's basically the premise behind having the primary ports being small and only one. Now, when you go full tilt, and I'll show you on this Holley carburetor right here, this one, primary side, right? Full tilt, rip, the whole deal, secondary is open. You get all 4 barrels of full rip, nasty, all the throttle, okay? The secondaries coming open give you that high velocity, tons of air, extra massive airflow. Generally, there's a lot more volume there, your secondaries, right? If you have 3-hole setup, your primary is only 1 hole, your secondary is 2 holes. The secondary is providing 100% more air than the primary, right? You have double the air coming in once the secondary is open. Okay, so understanding that, ask this question. What effects do those have? Dog just came in the door. What effects does having that staging have on your driving, right? You're barely cruising around, you're just driving the primary ports, you have better airflow control, right? But what that also means is that the engine can pull a more stable stream of air. It's not gasping for a ton of air. Therefore, when you roll into the throttle or take off or try to go up a hill, 10% or 20% variation in throttle is not a whole bunch of airflow, right, coming into your engine. When you have one giant throttle body, people always say the giant drivability is bad, right? One big throttle body, or a Weber, right? A Weber has no staging. A Weber carburetor, like a side draft. On a Weber, right, you just have one hole. So the difference in airflow from 0% to 10% throttle is a ton of air, versus on a primary and secondary setup, the difference between 0 and 10% is barely any air, right? Because you can now modulate the throttle better with the staging. So anyways, that's the aside, but getting into the porting of these two parts on a rotary, we're going to move into how that affects your drivability, okay? So on the channel, you've seen, if you've tuned along, we've built 2, maybe 3 half bridgeport engines. And what a half bridgeport is you leave the center iron primary ports street ported, nothing too aggressive, and you take the secondary ports of your engine and you do a bridgeport, which is like this. Lots of air, increase the overlap, increase the duration. Now, doing that, which we'll stick with that port because it's just a good way to explain it. Doing that is going to give you, right, if you have a staged throttle body, is going to give you that low-speed drivability, right, on the primary ports. Not a lot of airflow, a lot of good transient response. It's going to drive really nice, but when you pour the full pedal to the metal all the way through the carpet, out the thing, full Flintstone it, the secondary ports open up, you get all the benefits of having a ton of airflow come on the top end, and your power curve for that engine, right, is going to pick up a lot more power on the top end because of the extra airflow, right? So we'll just say, we'll go over to the whiteboard here, and I'll draw like a generic power curve for a stock port rotary, right? So rotaries are typically top end engines, RPM engines anyway. So you might see for a typical, right, stock port rotary, it's going to be like pretty normal, pretty normal, pretty normal. We'll say like this is your 4K RPM mark, right? You're going to start picking up speed, and then it'll taper off, right? Stock port rotary, pretty typical. I say that might be a little more exaggerated, whatever. Half bridgeport, street port. A street port rotary may pick up some, kind of everywhere, right? All the way through there. Now, your half bridgeport rotary is going to stay about the same as a street port, and it's going to come through here like this, and then it's going to pick up maybe a little later once it transitions in, but then your pickup's going to be much bigger on the big end, right? But you're still going to maintain like good drivability, consistency, and airflow down here. If you go to like a full bridge, right, you're basically chopping up with a full bridge. You're going to chop off everything below 2 grand because it's not going to idle below 2 grand. And then you're going to have little to no power, little to no power, little to no power, little to no power, and then it's going to go through the roof and come out this way, right? So that half bridgeport gives you that low speed drivability, gives you that top end rip. Okay? So that's kind of explaining that there. Now, you're also going to ask this question, right? Because this is why, or some of the things people don't get about a half bridge or whatever, this, that, and the other. Okay? A half bridge is going to give you a much more aggressive idle than a street port. And you might have this thing in your head, because this is what I have to explain to a lot of people when they ask this question. Well, you do a half bridge, okay, so the primary ports don't change. Well, only the primary port is open at idle, right? So why does a half bridge brap more than a street port, right? Because I'm explaining this as if, right, the primary drivability is only on the primary port, right? Only there. That the secondary ports are closed off. There's no airflow coming through the secondary ports until the secondary throttle blade opens. Well, I wish that were the case, but it's not. So, access to air creates a vacuum, right? So, even though this secondary port being giant and the throttle body blade for the secondary is being closed way up here, right, is going to restrict airflow through this port, you've still created overlap, right, which causes your braps. The rotor is pushing exhaust gases into the intake before it can then suck all of the air back in, right? So although this creates additional overlap and the port is closed, this port still has access to a plentum of air within the intake, right? So that access to that air is what's allowing that engine to still suck in more air and have a volume to push exhaust gases out of and then re-suck them in, right? The overlap, right? Even though the secondary port's closed way up here in the throttle body, which is going to give you an inherently less, or I guess we'll just ruin or take away some of your drivability versus a street port or a stock port, right? Because even though you're still giving you this much extra, porting, it's only on the secondaries. We're only using it when we're full rip pedal to the metal. It still inherently is allowing that engine more access to air and more access to air sooner because you have bigger duration, bigger ports, etc. Right? So, in my mind, personal preference, right? I know I've got a lot of guys. I say a lot comparatively, like 10%. But a bunch of people from Australia and New Zealand watch the videos, and I love hearing those guys comment because they're like, "Oh, everybody's got a Bridgeport down here," and I'm just like, "Dude, that's awesome." Because I think Bridgeports are just, if you're gonna have a rotary, it's got to be gnarly sound, and it's just the sound, right? I'm not a big sleeper rotary guy. If I'm gonna have a rotary engine car, it's gonna be rowdy. But anyways, I love hearing those guys talk about all their Bridgeport stuff and just, like I show them my little baby Bridgeport and they're like, "Oh, that's weak sauce. You should have a bigger Bridgeport," because I think, I should have a bigger Bridgeport. But anyways, short aside. So the drivability thing there, right? Your primary ports, if you do bridge, and this another benefit, downfall, whatever, your primary ports are generally small. So if you think about the increase of you porting this, right, and making a big change on the primary port, the actual additional volume of air is not that much per the effort you porting it. Thus, in my mind, the sacrifice of drivability is not worth porting the primary ports. Just do a half bridge. You're going to get that benefit up top anyways where you want it, right? And I don't think, the primary port thing is necessarily worth it to port these up. Now, my silver car, right, full bridge, has a Weber. Even if it was a half bridge, the Weber is not staged, so it literally doesn't matter. And on a rotary, what I mean by not I guess full circle, like I said, these videos are very raw. If you've never watched one of these before, it's just kind of me talking through everything. So generally, you should watch the whole video so you learn everything. Like I said earlier with the staging, if you don't have a staged throttle body, right? And a lot of the guys in Florida, I say the Puerto Rican guys, but just the guys in Florida that run those, I hate to put any sort of demographic on it, but those are the guys I see doing this a lot and running really, really, really rowdy carbureted stuff, and it's awesome to see it. They'll take a Holley manifold and run a spacer right underneath the Holley carburetor, which essentially takes the Holley and turns it into an unstaged throttle body where you don't have primary and secondary delineation all the way to the engine, right? So basically how a Weber and how an unstaged throttle body works is you have this one giant hole up here that you're opening and closing, and the air comes through that hole, goes through the 4 individual holes, and goes straight into the engine. Thus, opening the throttle body up here is allowing air access to all 4 ports in your rotary, the primaries and secondaries. The air can get all the way into all of them. Whereas, like this throttle body here, your OEM setup for your rotary, the primary port goes in and then only allows access to the primary ports in your engine. Now, on this GSLSE one, I'm pretty sure that this is just one giant opening hole in here, and there is no separation. I'd have to pull it apart and look again, but I'm pretty sure that's how this is set up. But on like a Nicky carburetor, your Holley carburetor, your FC engines, all that stuff, which I have one up here that's been all busted apart for a Turbo 2, because somebody thought that was a bright idea. It is separate all the way to the engine. So your primary port is one hole that goes all the way to the engine. So only air is coming through there when you're driving on this. The secondaries are closed. When you full rip it, it goes all the way in, and the secondary ones are open separately, right? Whereas a Weber is just, or a non-whatever, you get the picture, opens to all 4 holes. Okay, inherently less drivable, although if you go watch my the Bridgeport RX-7 drivable, streetable, whatever video I made a while back, which is popping off, is definitely drivable on the street. I mean, like, I've ridden in and driven some pretty big cam V8 cars that drive and buck and kick and are way more mad at you than my Bridgeport little 12A. Now, given, horsepower difference, big cam, whatever, it's probably making 450 horsepower. That little Bridgeport car, we're making 210, 220 to the tire, maybe 230-ish on a good day with a downwind and somebody Flintstone in the dyno for you. So, something I wanted to address was just kind of explaining that, more so with reference to the half Bridgeport thing. Because, yes, it is, in my opinion, right? Everyone's got one, is the best drivable port you can put on your engine for the most benefit. Like if you're paying somebody money to port your engine, right? The half bridge is the best way to do it. But, and we'll say there's two caveats to that. The half bridge is the best way to do it if you want like an NA motor that's still smooth and drivable. Okay. Any ported rotary is probably going to buck and kick a little bit. I mean, the street port's still going to give you a little bit, and the stock rotary still bucks and kicks a little bit. Now, if you're a boosted rotary, boost through your engine, don't do the porting for that much of a horsepower benefit, but do the porting for the sound. Okay? Boost, you can overcome a small port with more boost, right? Especially a lot of the high horsepower boost guys are running an FD REW engine, which has ginormous ports, right? This is a FD REW engine. This is a 12A right here. You can see how tiny the 12A port is compared to that. So if you're running boosted high horsepower stuff, you don't necessarily need the porting. I mean, you get the gnarly idle, this, that, and the other. I feel like I'm rambling, but that's just kind of me talking through these ports here, and I think that's a good explanation of like the drivability portion of your ports, right? You understand that if you're going to create, even if you create overlap in the secondary section and not the primary section, if you don't have a staged throttle body, you're going to have poor drivability. Weber cars are notoriously not the most drivable vehicles out there, anyways, even on a stock port. So just kind of know that. I hope that this video brought value to you guys. I did have I do have and get a lot of questions on that stuff when people are always asking. And it's one of those things that it takes forever to me explain it if I'm going to try to type it all out and do this. So I hope that makes sense, at least put that stuff in front of me to explain it to you in the port stuff and how it kind of ramps in a little bit better. The other thing, the last bit, the thoughts at the end of the video, right? If you have a 6-port engine, and I highly suggest you go back and look at the videos on my FC that I had. My white vert was a 6-port. So on a 6-port engine, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ports. The upper port in a 6-port, right, the top one, is actuated off of a valve. And you can see the valves on the race car right here, this guy. So the early ones are operated off of pressure. The S5 models are operated off of vacuum. The RX-8s are operated off of an electric motor inside there that opens those ports. On my FC, I did a bridge port on the 5th and 6th ports and then street ported the rest. And what that did is it really woke that car up on the top end because unlike a throttle body controlled port, right? You have, with that 6-port sleeve, a completely closed port at the engine. So that port doesn't have access to that plenum of air, right, that I explained earlier. Thus, you don't get a super gnarly idle if you bridge port that one, right? So you can have that full bridge up here, completely sealed off right here, street ported, and you don't have the overlap until it opens, which then at that point the overlap has no effect on your drivability because you have crazy airflow coming into the engine, thus the exhaust can't push air back into the intake. So one of those things to think about. The 6-port engine as an NA engine is a fantastic platform to create a super linear drivable rotary engine that has that peaky power and the advantages of it, but doesn't sacrifice the drivability. And Mazda spent way more time and years in development figuring that out than I've ever done, right? So, the 6-port engines are bomb for an NA setup. I would love, one of my dreams to put together one day, right? If I could ever make it work and make all the actuators and stuff work, would be to take the 6-port engine and full setup that I had in my FC, right? So S5, 6-port, high compression, the VDI, the auxiliary ports, and put that into a first gen. Because that engine setup would make 200 wheel, right? 13B, half bridge all the way up there, would probably make 200 wheel, and it would be smooth as gravy to drive. It would be one of the most epic cars to drive because it wouldn't sound ported, but you could just bury the tack to $9,000 and just let it eat, and it would respond well. I feel like to those of you that have driven a 6-port GSLC motor, even just a stock 13B, stock 12As and stuff, things that aren't ported, right? You hit that 5,000 RPM mark, and then they're just kind of like, they're just screaming RPM, but they're not pulling power. If you've driven a Bridgeport car like mine, that thing still feels like it's ripping, even when the tack is full buried, and you start blowing out spark and just the ignition can't keep up. So, I don't know. Take that information for what it's worth. I hope that obviously the beginning of the video, me explaining it was much more organized when my thoughts were all together than what I am right now. But definitely drop any comments with any questions below. I will happily answer them. I am working, like I said in the last couple videos, on the best way. I've been talking to a few of my other, not really YouTuber friends. I don't have a ton of crazy YouTuber friends, but some of my other friends on who can help ask questions and this, that, and the other, help me answer stuff to try to get you guys a good forum for asking questions and me helping you answer them. I think, obviously needs to be a decent place for me to kind of alleviate some liability. Obviously, I don't want to tell you to do something and you guys do it exactly to that point and it breaks your stuff. So just trying to find out the best way for me to effectively give you advice. Maybe it's just catered as advice and try it at your own risk. But drop a question or any comments below and I can get them sorted or help you out as best I can. If you guys have been following along with the rally car build, the reason that this style of video is coming up on a Thursday instead of a Monday is because I am prepping to prepping to start the vinyl wrap on this video or on this car, and that's going to take me some time. So, and it's one of those things that I don't have a full team of dudes here to help me wrap this car in a night. So it's going to be me laying every stripe, laying every tape line, measuring everything and doing it all. And it doesn't make sense for me to show you guys that mid-progress. So I do appreciate you guys tuning in, watching the videos on the channel, commenting, liking. If you have friends into this stuff, please share it. I always tell my other friends, fame is a symptom of success. So I don't expect to have a bajillion subscribers yet. We're not trying to make this thing huge right now. Obviously, down the road, it's going to come. Trust me, guys. We're going to make this thing something cool, something big. There's going to be a lot of crazy things coming on the channel as well in the future, not just car related, but also manufacturing, car parts related, because I have a lot of things that I have written down. If you've been following along, you know how my brain works. I have lists of parts to design and build for you guys to be able to take these first gens to the next level, to be able to get your front end sorted out, to get all this other stuff sorted out. That it'll be epic, guys. So stay tuned if you're into that stuff. Thank you guys very much for watching. We'll see you next week. Have a wonderful Memorial Day. Keep it rad. What you doing? What you doing? What? Hey, you jump. Jump. Oh, good job. Peace.